On Father's Day, my millionaire son visited and asked, "Are you enjoying the $2,000 monthly, Dad?" I was puzzled and replied, "Son, the church is helping me survive." That's when his greedy daughter-in-law opened the door. "I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and comment which city you're watching from. This way I can see how far my story has reached." The doorbell rang exactly at 3 p.m., just like it always did when Michael came to visit me. 65 years living in this same house had taught me to recognize the sounds that announced important visits. And today was Father's Day. I hurried to open the door, wiping my hands on the apron I always wear when cooking. I had prepared beef stew with potatoes, my son's favorite dish since he was little. The aroma filled the entire house, mixing with the scent of the roses I had cut from the garden to decorate the table. "Dad." Michael hugged me with that perfect smile he'd always had, the same one he used as a child when he had done something he was proud of. He wore an expensive suit, the kind that costs more than what I spend in 3 months. His shoes shone so brightly I could see my reflection in them. "My dear son, what a pleasure to have you here." I kissed his cheek, noticing the scent of his expensive cologne, so different from the simple soap I use. Come in. Come in. Everything is ready for you." Jessica entered behind him as she always did. My daughter-in-law wore a white dress that surely cost more than my rent for 6 months, and her perfectly manicured nails held a bouquet of expensive flowers while she gave me a hug that felt cold, mechanical. "Happy Father's Day, Robert," she said with that sweet voice that had never completely convinced me. There was something in her eyes that always made me uncomfortable, as if she was constantly calculating something. We sat in the living room, the same one where Michael had played as a child, where he had studied for his college exams, where he had announced he was going to marry Jessica 5 years ago. The furniture was old but well-maintained, every cushion in its exact place, every surface clean, despite the fact that I no longer had the money to buy the cleaning products I used before. "Dad." Michael settled into the main armchair, the one that had belonged to his father before he died 10 years ago. "I need to ask you something important." His tone changed. He was no longer the loving son who had just arrived. Now there was something serious in his voice, something that made me feel a knot in my stomach. Jessica sat beside him, but I noticed she remained very quiet, quieter than usual. "Tell me, son, you know you can ask me anything." Michael looked directly into my eyes with that intensity he had inherited from his father. "Are you happy with the $2,000 I send you every month, Dad?" The world stopped. $2,000 every month. The words echoed in my head like distant bells I couldn't fully understand. I felt as if the air had become denser, harder to breathe. "What are you saying, son?" My voice came out weaker than I expected. "The $2,000 monthly, Dad. I've been sending it to you religiously for 8 months. I wanted to make sure you're comfortable, that you lack nothing." Michael smiled with pride, as if he expected me to tell him how grateful I was. But I didn't understand anything. $2,000 monthly. If I had received that amount, my life would be completely different. I wouldn't have to go to St. Matthew's Church every Tuesday and Friday to collect the food package that the sisters of the temple organize. I wouldn't have to count every dollar before going to the market. I wouldn't have to ask Mr. Johnson, my neighbor, to help me when the electricity bill accumulates. "Michael," I said slowly, feeling my heart start beating faster. "Son, I haven't received any money from you." The smile immediately vanished from his face. "What do you mean you haven't received money?" "Dad, I send you $2,000 on the 15th of every month. Jessica takes care of delivering it to you personally." My eyes automatically moved to Jessica. She had been very quiet during the entire conversation, but now her face had changed completely. She no longer had that calculating expression she always wore. Now she looked scared. "Jessica comes here every month," Michael continued, looking at his wife. "She tells me that you chat, that she gives you the money, and that you're always very grateful." I felt as if a deep pit had opened in my stomach. Jessica did visit me, yes, but not every month. Maybe once every 3 or 4 months. And they were always short, uncomfortable visits where we barely talked about superficial things. She had never, ever given me money. "Son," My voice was trembling now. Your wife hasn't given me any money. I live with help from St. Matthew's Church. Every week I go for the food package that the sisters organize, and when bills accumulate, I have to ask neighbors or the parish for help. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael looked at Jessica with an expression I had never seen before. His eyes had hardened like when he was a child, and discovered someone had broken something valuable and was trying to figure out who had done it. "Jessica," he said in a voice that sounded dangerous. "What's happening here?" Jessica stood up abruptly from the couch. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to compose a smile. "Oh, Robert, I think you're a little confused. Don't you remember our visits? We always chat for a while, and I leave the envelope with the money on the kitchen table. But I knew perfectly well that wasn't true. My memory was perfect. I could remember every detail of every day." Desperation began to grow in my chest like a caged animal wanting to escape. "No, Jessica, that's not true. You haven't given me any money. If I had received $2,000 every month, my life would be completely different." Michael stood up slowly. At that moment, I heard someone knocking at the door. Jessica practically ran to open it, as if looking for any excuse to escape from that conversation. When she opened the door, I was surprised to see Sister Margaret from St. Matthew's Church. She was an older woman of about 70, who coordinated the aid program for needy families. "Good afternoon, Robert. Sorry for interrupting, but I came to bring you this week's food package, and to remind you that tomorrow, there's a meeting to organize next month's collection." Sister Margaret entered with a grocery bag full of basic products: rice, beans, oil, some cans of tuna. It was exactly the type of help that a person without regular resources would need to survive. Michael looked at the bag, then looked at Sister Margaret, then looked at me. His face had changed completely. There were no more doubts in his eyes, only a cold fury that reminded me of his father when he discovered a lie. Sister Margaret, unaware of the drama that was unfolding, continued talking. "Robert is always so grateful for the community's help. It's a blessing to be able to support our elderly brothers who live with limited resources." Jessica had remained paralyzed by the door, holding the knob as if it were the only thing keeping her standing. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, breathed deeply, and when he opened them again, the fury had been replaced by something worse: total disappointment. At that moment, I knew that something fundamental had changed forever in my family. The truth had come to light, but the price of that truth would be higher than any of us could imagine. Sister Margaret left after leaving me the food package, not knowing she had just witnessed the moment that would change everything. The atmosphere in the room had become so dense it seemed like the air itself weighed more. Michael remained standing in the middle of the room, looking alternately at Jessica and me, as if we were pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Jessica," my son said with a voice I had never heard before, a voice that was frightening, "I want you to explain to me exactly what's happening here." Jessica was still by the door, her hand still on the knob. Her face had lost all color, and I could see small drops of sweat forming on her forehead despite it not being hot. "Michael, honey, I think your father is confused. You know how elderly people are. Sometimes they forget things." Her voice sounded high-pitched, desperate. Those words hurt me more than any physical blow. Confused, forgetting things. Me, who remembered every dollar I spent, every favor I received, every day I had to decide between buying medicine or food. "Jessica," I interrupted, and my voice came out stronger than expected. "I'm not confused. I haven't received a single dollar from my son in these 8 months. If I had received it, I wouldn't be living on church charity." Michael walked to his expensive leather briefcase and took out his cell phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, and I could see the tension in his shoulders in the way he clenched his jaw. "We're going to resolve this right now," he muttered, more to himself than to us. "Here are all the transfers." He approached me and showed me his phone screen. There they were, one after another, 8 transfers of $2,000 each, all directed to an account that, according to him, was mine. "See, Dad? Here's everything. October 15th, November 15th, December 15th. He continued reading the dates, but I couldn't concentrate on his words because something terrible was growing in my chest. Michael, son, I don't have that bank account. My only account is the one I opened 20 years ago at the corner bank, and there I only have $150. Michael stopped dead, looked at his phone screen, then looked at me, then directed his gaze toward Jessica. She had started backing toward the door like a cornered animal looking for an exit. Jessica. Michael's voice was now a dangerous whisper. Whose bank account is this? I don't know what you're talking about, honey. There must be some mistake. But Michael was already dialing a number on his phone. I could vaguely hear someone's voice on the other side of the line, probably someone from the bank. Yes, I need to verify account information. Yes, I can provide my identification. It's an account I've been transferring money to. The conversation lasted several minutes. During that time, Jessica and I remained silent, but I could feel her eyes on me. When I finally looked at her, I saw something in her expression that made me feel a chill. She no longer looked scared. She looked angry, as if I were to blame for what was happening. Michael hung up the phone and remained motionless for a moment with his eyes closed. When he opened them, I realized my son had changed forever. The account is in the name of Jessica Williams Thompson, he said with a voice so cold it seemed to come from winter. My wife has been receiving the money I thought I was sending to my father. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the birds in the garden that normally sang all afternoon could be heard. It was as if the entire world had stopped to witness this moment. Jessica finally left the door handle and walked toward the center of the room. But instead of looking defeated, she straightened up and looked at me with an expression that chilled my blood. Fine, yes. The money was going to my account, but it's not what you think. Michael approached her with slow, deliberate steps. It's not what we think, Jessica. That money was for my father. Where is it? I was saving it for him, she lied shamelessly. I wanted to accumulate a large amount before giving it to him so it would be a nice surprise. I have all the money saved. But I knew that wasn't true. I had seen how Jessica's lifestyle had changed in recent months. The new dresses every time I saw her, the jewelry she didn't have before, the new car she had bought supposedly with savings from her work at the boutique. Show us that money, Michael said. It's at the house, in our safe. We can go right now to get it. Michael nodded, but then looked at me. Dad, do you want to come with us? Michael and Jessica's house was in an expensive residential neighborhood, full of large houses with perfect gardens and luxury cars at every entrance. I had always felt uncomfortable there, as if I didn't belong to that world. But today, that discomfort was different. Today, I was afraid. When we arrived, Jessica led us to Michael's study, where they had a safe built into the wall. With trembling hands, she dialed the combination and opened the metal door. Inside were some important documents, some jewelry, and a white envelope. Jessica took the envelope and handed it to Michael. Here's all your father's money, the complete $16,000. Michael opened the envelope. Inside was money, but when he counted it, his expression darkened even more. There's only $3,000 here, Jessica. Well, I've had to use some for household expenses, but I always planned to replace it before giving it to your father. It was at that moment I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about respect, trust, family love. Jessica had taken the money my son sent me with so much affection and had spent it on herself while I ate thanks to church charity. Household expenses. Michael practically roared. Jessica, that money was for my father. My father has been living in poverty while you spent his money on your clothes and whims. Michael, calm down. I can explain everything. But Michael was no longer listening to her. He had walked to the desk and opened a laptop. His fingers flew over the keyboard with controlled fury. I'm going to review all our bank accounts, Jessica. I'm going to see exactly what my father's money was spent on. At that moment, I saw Jessica's face change completely. The mask of the perfect wife fell off completely, and what remained was something cold, calculating, without remorse. Do whatever you want, Michael, but remember I'm your wife. Your father won't be here forever, but I will. Those words pierced me like daggers. Not only had she stolen my money, But now she was threatening me, reminding my son that he would have to choose between the two of us. And at that moment, while watching my son paralyzed between his father and his wife, I knew the worst was yet to come. The days following that terrible afternoon felt like living in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. Michael didn't speak to me for a complete week. A whole week without hearing my only son's voice, without knowing if we could ever repair what had been broken between us. When he finally called me, his voice sounded tired, as if he had aged years in those few days. "Dad, we need to talk. I'm coming over." He arrived alone, without Jessica, which gave me a small hope. Maybe he had made the right decision. Maybe he had seen the truth clearly. But when he entered my house, his expression told me everything I needed to know. He didn't come as my repentant son. He came as a man who had made a difficult decision. "Dad, please sit down." His tone was formal, distant, as if I were a client in his office and not the man who had carried him for his entire childhood. I sat in my favorite chair, that rocking chair where I used to sing to him when he was little, where I had spent entire nights when he had fever, where I had listened to his problems when he was a teenager. Now it felt like I was sitting in the defendant's chair. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Michael began, avoiding looking directly into my eyes. "And I think there are things you need to understand. Tell me, son." My voice came out smaller than I expected. "Jessica made a mistake, yes, but she's been under a lot of pressure lately. Her work at the boutique hasn't been going well, and she thought she was doing the right thing by saving the money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Saving the money while I ate beans from church charity. "Michael's son, she spent the money on clothes, on jewelry. She wasn't saving it for me." "Dad, I understand you're upset, but Jessica is my wife. She's the mother of my future children. I can't simply abandon her for a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. That word hurt me more than any insult. My son was calling the fact that his wife had robbed me and left me living in poverty for 8 months a misunderstanding. "Michael, it's not a misunderstanding, it's theft, it's lies, it's betrayal." "Dad, enough." His voice had hardened. "Jessica has explained everything to me. She was scared to tell you she had the money because she thought you'd get angry if you hadn't asked for it directly. She didn't know how to handle the situation. And that's why she bought new dresses? That's why she changed her car?" Michael sighed deeply, as if I were a capricious child who didn't understand adult things. "Dad, some of those purchases were necessary for her work. She has to look professional, and the car, well, her old car broke down." Every word that came out of my son's mouth destroyed me a little more. I could see that Jessica had worked on him, that she had planted doubts about my version of events, that she had found an explanation for each of her lies. "And what about the missing money, Michael? We only found $3,000 of the $16,000 you sent me." Jessica explained to me that she had some medical expenses she hadn't told me about, women's things, but she's going to replace everything gradually. I remained silent for a moment, processing what I had just heard. My son had chosen to believe his wife's lies over his father's word. He had decided it was easier to think I was exaggerating or confused than to accept he had married a thief. "Michael," I finally said, "do you really think I would be lying about this? Do you think I would invent a story like this?" For the first time in the conversation, he looked directly into my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. I saw doubt. I saw my son wondering if his 65-year-old father was losing his mind, if he was inventing stories out of spite or jealousy toward his daughter-in-law. "Dad, I don't think you're lying, but I think maybe things aren't exactly as you remember them." Those words were like a slap. My own son doubted my sanity, my memory, my honesty. Jessica had managed to plant the seed of doubt, and that seed had grown into a tree that now separated us. "All right, Michael." I stood up from the rocking chair, suddenly feeling very old, very tired. "If that's what you think of your father, then there's nothing more to talk about. Dad, don't be like that. I'm just trying to be fair to everyone." "Fair." The laugh that came from my throat sounded bitter, hollow. "Fair is letting your wife steal the money you send me while I eat thanks to charity. Fair is doubting your father's word." Michael stood up too, but didn't approach me. He stayed on the other side of the room, as if there were an invisible wall between us. Dad, Jessica has agreed to return the money to you gradually. We're going to establish a different system for transfers. Everything will be fine. No, Michael, it won't be fine. I walked to the window looking at the garden where he had played as a child. Your wife robbed and humiliated me, and you're choosing to protect her instead of defending your father. It's not like that, Dad. I'm not choosing anyone. I turned to look at him one last time. Yes, son. Yes, you are choosing, and your choice is very clear. Michael remained motionless for a moment, as if waiting for me to say something more, to give him permission to leave with a clear conscience. But I had nothing more to give him. I love you, Dad. I'll always love you. But Jessica is my wife and I have to protect my marriage. And I'm your father, Michael. But it seems that doesn't mean anything anymore. He left without kissing my cheek, without hugging me, without looking back. I watched him walk away through the window, get into his expensive car, and disappear around the corner. At that moment, I knew I had lost something more than money. I had lost my son. The following days were the darkest of my life. Michael didn't call me, didn't visit me, didn't respond to my messages. It was as if I had died to him, as if the 65 years of unconditional love I had given him had been erased from his memory. But the worst came when I started hearing the comments. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor across the street, told me she had seen Jessica at the supermarket, complaining to her friends about problematic fathers-in-law who invent stories to get attention. Mr. Johnson, who had helped me so many times with the electricity bills, told me he had heard rumors that I was losing my memory, and that's why there were problems in the family. Jessica had started a silent but effective campaign to destroy my reputation. She didn't attack me directly, but planted doubts about my mental stability, about my version of events, about my ability to remember things correctly. And the most painful thing of all was knowing that Michael was probably hearing those same stories at home, that every night Jessica reminded him how confused his father was, how difficult it was to deal with me, how much better it would be for everyone if we kept our distance. One afternoon, while I was sweeping the patio, I saw a car stop in front of my house. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it was Michael who had come to apologize. But when Jessica got out alone, all hope vanished. She came dressed in new clothes again, carrying bags from expensive stores. She approached my door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Robert. Can we talk?" I let her in more out of curiosity than courtesy. I wanted to hear what new lie she had come to tell me. "I came to bring you this," she said, taking an envelope from her bag. "It's $500. It's part of the money I owe you." I took the envelope, feeling the thickness of the bills inside. It was real money, but somehow it felt dirty in my hands. "I also wanted to apologize to you," she continued, sitting in my living room as if she owned the place. "I know I made mistakes, but I want you to know it was never my intention to hurt you. Your intention was to rob me. Don't call it robbery, Robert. It was a misunderstanding, a bad decision. But Michael and I have talked, and we're going to do things right from now on." I sat across from her, studying her face. There was no real remorse there, no genuine guilt, only calculation, strategy, the satisfaction of someone who knows they've won. "What do you really want, Jessica?" Her smile became wider, colder. "I want us to have a good relationship, Robert, for Michael's sake. He's very stressed with all this conflict, and I just want us to be a happy family." "A happy family," I repeated. "How can there be a happy family when it's built on lies?" "They're not lies, Robert. They're different perspectives of the same events, and I think it would be better for everyone if we left the past in the past." At that moment, I understood completely what was happening. Jessica hadn't come to apologize or make peace. She had come to establish the rules of the game. She was telling me she had won, that Michael was on her side, and that my only option was to accept her version of events if I wanted to maintain any kind of relationship with my son. "And if I don't accept leaving the past in the past?" Her smile faded for a second, and in her eyes I saw a flash of something dangerous. "Well, Robert, That would be your decision. But Michael is very loyal to the people he loves, and right now the person he loves most in the world is me. She stood up, smoothed her expensive skirt, and walked toward the door. Think about it, Robert. Do you really want to lose your son out of pride? When she left, I remained sitting in my living room holding the envelope with the $500. It was a small fraction of what she had stolen from me, but it was also something more. It was the price she was offering me for my silence, for my dignity, for accepting to live in a world where her lies were worth more than a father's truth. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, I realized that maybe I had already lost my son forever. 3 months passed like an eternity. 3 months without hearing Michael's voice, without a message, without a call, without even a word through third parties. It was as if my son had decided I no longer existed, as if the 65 years of unconditional love I had poured on him had completely evaporated. The $500 Jessica had given me ran out quickly. I spent it on blood pressure medication that had started rising since all this trouble began, and on some urgent house repairs. The water tank had broken, and Mr. Johnson, my neighbor, had helped me fix it, but I had to pay him for the materials. I returned to depending completely on the church food package. Every Tuesday and Friday I walked the 6 blocks to St. Matthew's Parish. I stood in line with other elderly ladies and needy families, and received my bag with rice, beans, oil, and some cans. Sister Margaret always received me with a genuine smile, but I could see growing concern in her eyes. "Robert, are you sure there's no way your family can help you more?" she asked me one Tuesday afternoon, while reviewing the list of beneficiaries of the food package program. I didn't know what to answer her. How do you explain to a nun that your only son has abandoned you because he prefers to believe his thieving wife's lies? How do you tell her you've lost not only money, but also the love and respect of the only family you had? It's complicated, Sister Margaret. My family is going through a difficult time. She nodded with understanding but didn't press further. She was a wise woman who had seen many sad stories in her years of community work. The greatest humiliation came on a Thursday afternoon. I had gone to the market with the few dollars I had, trying to stretch the money to buy some chicken to complement the beans from the food package. I was at Don Roberto's butcher shop, where I had shopped for years, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Robert." I turned and saw Martha, a woman I had known at Michael's birthday parties when he was a child. She was the mother of one of his elementary school friends, and although we didn't see each other frequently, we had always maintained a cordial relationship. "Martha, what a pleasure to see you," I said, trying to sound natural while Don Roberto wrapped my small purchase of half a pound of chicken. "Oh, Robert, I'm so glad to find you. I recently ran into your daughter-in-law, Jessica, at the new shopping center." My stomach tensed immediately. "Ah, yes. She was shopping at those very expensive stores. She had bags from boutiques I wouldn't even dream of entering. She looked beautiful, very elegant." Martha smiled, but there was something in her eyes that made me nervous. We chatted for a while, and she told me Michael spoils her a lot, that he gives her everything she wants. "How nice," I murmured, paying Don Roberto my $15. "But she also told me something that worried me a lot, Robert." Martha's voice had become more serious, more intimate. "She told me that you've been a little confused lately, that sometimes you forget things or invent situations that didn't happen." I felt as if they had poured a bucket of ice water over me. "What things did she say exactly?" "Oh, Robert, I don't want to get into family trouble, but she told me that sometimes you accuse people of things they didn't do, that Michael is very worried about your mental state, that they're considering taking you to a specialist doctor." Martha's words felt like stabs. Jessica had not only stolen from me and convinced my son I was crazy, but now she was spreading that lie throughout the neighborhood, destroying my reputation with people who had known me for years. "Martha," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "do you really think I would invent stories?" She looked at me with an expression that was half pity, half discomfort. "Oh, Robert, I've known you for many years and you've always been a very centered man. But age sometimes does strange things to all of us. My own mother in her last years sometimes said things that didn't make sense. I'm not senile, Martha. Of course not, dear. But maybe it would be good if you talked to some doctor, right? Just so the family can rest easy. I left the market feeling like I was carrying an enormous weight in my chest. Not only had I lost my son and been robbed by my daughter-in-law, but now all the people in the neighborhood thought I was losing my mind. That night, sitting in my rocking chair, looking at the photos of Michael I had in the living room, I realized how completely alone I was. I had no living siblings. My parents had died years ago, and the few cousins I had lived in other states. Michael had been my only real family, my only purpose, my only reason to keep going after his mother died. And now I had nothing. The days became a mechanical routine of survival. I would get up, do the house chores, watch a little television, cook with the little I had, and go to bed early to not waste electricity. Weekends were the worst because they used to be when Michael visited me, when my house filled with laughter and life. One Saturday morning I was watering the garden plants when I saw a familiar car parking in front of my house. My heart raced because I thought it was Michael. But when the door opened, Jessica got out, but this time she wasn't alone. With her got out an older woman I didn't know. Very well dressed, with expensive glasses and an air of authority that immediately put me on alert. Jessica approached the door with her usual fake smile, but the woman accompanying her looked at me with an evaluative expression, as if I were a laboratory specimen. "Hello, Robert. I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Williams. She's a specialist in memory problems in older adults." I felt as if the ground had moved beneath my feet. "Doctor." "Yes," Dr. Williams intervened with a professional but condescending voice. "Your daughter-in-law has told me about some worrying episodes you've had lately. Confusion, memory loss, unfounded accusations toward family members." "I haven't had any episodes of confusion," I said, feeling anger growing in my chest. "Mr. Thompson," the doctor consulted a notebook she carried in her hand. "According to your family, you've been accusing your daughter-in-law of stealing money that never existed, of inventing visits that did occur, of creating family conflicts based on imaginary situations. That's not true." My voice came out louder than expected. "Jessica did steal the money my son sent me." The doctor and Jessica exchanged a look that made me feel like a capricious child having a tantrum. "Mr. Thompson," the doctor continued, "denial is very common in these cases. Patients with early cognitive deterioration frequently—" "I don't have cognitive deterioration," I shouted, completely losing control. "Jessica is a thief and a liar and has convinced my son that I'm crazy." "Robert, please calm down," Jessica said with a soft voice, acting as if she were the victim of an uncontrolled elderly man. "Look how you get. This is why we're worried about you." The doctor took notes quickly in her notebook. "Aggressiveness, paranoia, persistent accusations toward family members. Yes, we definitely need to do some studies." "I don't need any studies. I need my son to stop believing this woman's lies." "Mr. Thompson." The doctor closed her notebook and looked at me with an expression of false compassion. "I understand this is difficult for you, but your family only wants to help you. There are medications that can help with these symptoms." "Get out of my house," I screamed, no longer able to contain my tears of frustration and anger. "Both of you get out right now." Jessica and the doctor left, but before getting in the car, I heard the doctor tell Jessica, "There are definitely clear signs of deterioration. I'm going to write a report so you can start the legal guardianship process if necessary." Those words chilled my blood. Guardianship. They wanted to declare me mentally incompetent so Michael and Jessica could control my life completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the entire house looking at every corner, every object that had witnessed the life I had built for 65 years. My house, where I had raised Michael, where I had cared for my wife until the day she died, where I had lived every important moment of my life. And now they wanted to take everything away from me based on the lies of a woman who had robbed me and manipulated my son to abandon me. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I felt something stronger than sadness and despair. I felt a cold, calculating anger growing in my chest like a fire that had been sleeping for too long. I wasn't going to allow them to declare me insane. I wasn't going to allow Jessica to win completely, and I definitely wasn't going to allow them to take away my house and dignity without a fight. But to fight, I needed weapons. And for the first time in months, I began to think like a man who had survived 65 years in this world, not like a defenseless victim. The war was just beginning. The call came on a Tuesday morning when I was preparing my chamomile tea. The phone rang with that insistence that indicates something important is about to happen. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something inside me told me to answer. Mr. Robert Thompson? Yes, that's me. My name is attorney David Martinez. I'm an accountant. I work for your son Michael at his company. Could I come see you this afternoon? It's very important. My heart started beating faster. Is everything okay with Michael? Your son is fine, sir, but I need to talk to you about some irregularities I've found in the accounts. That afternoon, attorney Martinez arrived at my house with a thick folder full of documents. He was a man of about 40 with a serious face and glasses that gave him a very formal air. But when he looked at me, I saw compassion in his eyes. Mr. Thompson, what I'm going to show you may be very painful, but I believe you have the right to know. He sat in my living room and opened the folder on the coffee table. Inside were bank statements, copies of transfers, and reports I didn't completely understand, but that clearly showed money movements. As your son's accountant, I have access to all the company accounts and the personal ones he manages through us. A few weeks ago, Michael asked me to review the transfers he's been sending to you. He asked you for that? Yes, I think he was starting to have doubts about what his wife had told him. The attorney pointed to a series of numbers on the paper. These are the transfers from the last 8 months. $16,000 in total sent to an account in the name of Jessica Williams Thompson. I already knew that. Yes, but what you didn't know is what happened afterward. He turned to another page. Look at these movements. Every time the money arrived in your daughter-in-law's account, she immediately transferred it to another personal account she has at a different bank. My breathing became more labored. Another account? A secret account that your son didn't know about. And look what that money was spent on. He showed me a long list of purchases. Designer clothes, jewelry, beauty treatments, trips, even payments for an apartment she's renting downtown. An apartment? What does Jessica need an apartment for? Attorney Martinez looked at me with a very serious expression. Mr. Thompson, I believe your daughter-in-law is planning to divorce your son. The apartment is in her name. She's been accumulating personal assets and has been moving money to accounts Michael can't touch. I felt as if the world had stopped. Does Michael know this? Not yet. I just finished the investigation last night. But there's more. He took out another series of documents. I also found that she's been using your son's corporate credit card for personal expenses. In total, she's diverted almost $50,000 in the last 2 years. $50,000. An amount I couldn't even imagine while I had been eating beans from charity and asking for help to pay the electricity bill. Attorney, are you going to show this to Michael? Yes, sir. In fact, I have an appointment with him tomorrow morning, but I wanted to talk to you first because I think you're going to need support when all this comes to light. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed thinking about everything the attorney had shown me. It wasn't just that Jessica had stolen from me. She had been stealing from Michael too, planning to abandon him after bleeding him financially. And the worst of all was knowing that my son had been defending a woman who was betraying him in the cruelest possible way. The next day, around noon, I heard a car stop in front of my house with a sharp brake. I looked out the window and saw Michael getting out of his car with his face completely shattered. He was running toward my door, and I knew he had already talked to attorney Martinez. When I opened the door, my son looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled, and he had in his hands the same folder the attorney had shown me the day before. Dad, his voice came out broken. Forgive me, please, forgive me. He fell into my arms like when he was a child and had nightmares. He cried on my shoulder for several minutes while I stroked his hair, as I had done thousands of times during his childhood. Dad, you were right about everything. Jessica isn't the woman I thought she was. I led him to the living room and served him a glass of water. He looked destroyed, completely broken. Attorney Martinez showed me everything this morning. The bank statements, the transfers, the secret apartment, the credit cards, everything. He ran his hands over his face. Dad, she's been stealing from me for years, not just from you, from me too. Where is she now? I don't know. When I got home this morning after the meeting with Martinez, she was gone. She took all her things, emptied the safe, and left this. He showed me a handwritten letter. The handwriting was elegant, careful, but the words were like poison. Michael, by the time you read this, I'll already be gone. Our marriage has been a mistake from the beginning. You never gave me what I deserved. You always put your father above me. I'm leaving with someone who knows how to value me. Don't try to find me. I already talked to a lawyer, and I'm going to file for divorce. Jessica. With someone else? I asked, though deep down I already suspected the answer. Yes, Dad, it seems she's been seeing another man for months. The apartment she rented wasn't just for her. Michael broke down again. Dad, I was an idiot. I defended her when you were telling me the truth. I doubted my own father for a woman who was lying to me about everything. I hugged him, feeling how he trembled in my arms. Michael, son, she manipulated you. That's what people like her do. But I should have known better. You're my father. You've known me since before I was born. How could I doubt you? Because she was very good at what she did, son, and because you wanted to believe you had found true love. We stayed embraced for a long while. For the first time in months, I felt I had my son back, not the man who had been defending a liar, but the child I had raised with love and values. Dad, I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to return all the money she stole from you with interest. I'm going to pay for all the medical expenses you need. I'm going to— Michael, I interrupted him gently. Money isn't the most important thing. Then what is? The most important thing is that you learn from this, that you never again doubt the people who really love you just because someone else tells you pretty lies. He nodded, wiping away his tears. Can you forgive me, Dad? I already forgave you from the moment you knocked on my door, son. But while I hugged him, I knew that although I had recovered Michael, the scars from these months wouldn't be easily erased. I had lost trust in my son. I had lived in poverty while my daughter-in-law spent my money on luxuries. I had been humiliated in the neighborhood, and they had almost declared me mentally incompetent. The forgiveness was real, but I also needed Michael to understand that things couldn't go back to being exactly as they were before. This experience had changed both of us, and the new relationship we would build would have to be different. Michael, I finally said, there's something else we need to talk about. What, Dad? The doctor Jessica brought here, the report she made saying I was losing my mind. Michael's face darkened. Dad, that was Jessica's idea. She convinced me you were having memory problems, that you needed medical help. And you believed it was necessary to bring a doctor without consulting me? Michael lowered his head, ashamed. Yes, Dad, and I deeply regret it. Good, because that doctor made an official report, and that report could have been used to take away my house, my independence, my dignity. Dad, I would never have allowed— Michael, you already allowed Jessica to control this situation for months. What guarantees do I have that you wouldn't have allowed them to take away my house too? We looked at each other in silence for a moment. It was a difficult but necessary question. Michael needed to fully understand the damage that had been done, not just from the stolen money, but from the betrayal of his trust. You're right, Dad. I don't have the right to ask you to trust me automatically after what happened. No, son, you don't. But you do have the opportunity to earn that trust again. He nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? First, I want you to go to that doctor and demand she withdraw her report. I want it to be officially clear that there's nothing wrong with my mind. Done. Second, I want you to recover every dollar Jessica stole. Not just what belonged to me, but everything she stole from you too. I'm already working on that with Attorney Martinez. And third, I said, looking directly into his eyes, I want you to understand that our relationship is going to be different from now on. I love you, Michael, but I'm no longer going to accept being treated like a burden or like someone who can be easily doubted. I understand, Dad, I really do. And I promise I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I deserve your forgiveness. I looked at him for a long moment, studying his face, searching for signs of genuine sincerity. What I saw there was a broken man who had finally learned a very hard lesson about the value of true family. All right, Michael, we're going to try. But while we embraced again, I knew that although Jessica was gone, the consequences of her lies and manipulations would accompany us for a long time. The difference was that now we would face them together as father and son, and not as enemies separated by a stranger's lies. 6 months after Jessica disappeared from our lives, reality had settled like dust after a storm. Michael had kept his promises. He recovered all the stolen money, made Dr. Williams officially withdraw her report, and divorced Jessica without fighting for any material goods. She had taken what she could and had disappeared with her lover, leaving behind only debts and lies. But the most important changes didn't have to do with money or legal documents. They had to do with us. Michael now visited me every Sunday, as he had done for years before marrying Jessica. But these visits were different. He no longer came as the successful son who condescended to see his poor father. He came as a humble man who had learned the value of true family in the most painful way possible. "Dad," he told me one Sunday while we ate the beef stew I had prepared for him, "I've been thinking about something. Tell me, son, would you like to come live with me? The house feels very empty and I think it would do me good to have you close." The proposal took me by surprise. Michael's house was beautiful, large, full of comforts I had never had. But after everything that had happened, the idea of depending on him again, even with the best intentions, made me uncomfortable. "Michael, I appreciate the offer, but I'm fine here in my house. But Dad, you could have your own room, your private bathroom. You wouldn't have to worry about expenses anymore." "Son," I interrupted him gently, "it's not about the comforts. It's about my independence." I saw confusion in his eyes. For him, after what had happened, it was natural that I would want the security of being close to him, of being cared for and protected. "I don't understand, Dad." "Michael, during the months Jessica stole from me and you abandoned me, I learned something very important. I learned that I can survive alone. I learned that I don't need someone to take care of me to have dignity. But I want to take care of you, Dad. I want to make up for everything I put you through. And I appreciate that very much, son. But the way to make up for it isn't by making me depend on you again. The way to make up for it is by respecting my ability to make my own decisions." Michael remained quiet for a moment, processing my words. He had matured a lot in these months, but he still had trouble understanding that I had changed too. "So what do you want, Dad?" "I want us to be family, but as equals. I want you to visit me because you enjoy my company, not because you feel obligated. I want you to respect my decisions even when you don't understand them, and I want you to never again doubt my word just because someone else tells you something different." "I understand. I really do." He nodded slowly. "I think I do. You want love, not pity. Respect, not charity." "Exactly. We established new rules for our relationship. Michael gave me a reasonable monthly amount for my expenses, but in my own bank account, under my total control. He visited me every Sunday, but if I ever didn't want visits, he would respect that. And most importantly, he had promised that he would never again allow a third person to interfere in our father-son relationship. The real test of these new boundaries came 3 months later, when Michael started dating a new woman. Her name was Elena. She was an elementary school teacher, divorced with an 8-year-old daughter. She was a simple, hard-working woman, very different from Jessica. But when Michael introduced her to me, I saw something in her eyes that put me on alert. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thompson," Elena told me with a smile that didn't completely convince me. "Michael has told me so much about you." "I hope good things," I replied, observing her carefully. Over the following weeks, I began to notice small details, Elena always found excuses for Michael not to visit me on Sundays. We have plans with my daughter, or my family organized a reunion, and gradually Michael's visits became less frequent. One Sunday when Michael hadn't come in 3 weeks, I decided to do something I had never done before. I called him. "Son, can we talk?" "Of course, Dad." "Is something wrong?" "Yes, something's wrong. I haven't seen you in 3 weeks. There was an uncomfortable pause. "Dad, it's just that Elena has had many family activities and she wants me to participate." "Michael," I interrupted him, "do you remember the conversation we had about not allowing third parties to interfere in our relationship?" Another pause. "Yes, Dad." "Good, because that's exactly what's happening again." "No, Dad, it's not the same. Elena isn't like Jessica." "Maybe not, son, but the patterns are very similar. She's gradually distancing you from me, and you're allowing it." "Dad, she just wants me to get to know her family, to integrate." "And what about your family, Michael? What about me?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Elena hadn't explicitly forbidden visits to her father-in-law, but she had done something more subtle and more effective. She had filled all of Michael's free spaces with activities that didn't include me. "Dad, I don't want to fight with you about this." "We're not fighting, son. We're having an honest conversation, and the conversation is this. If you want to have a relationship with me, you're going to have to make space for that relationship. If Elena can't understand that, then maybe she's not the right woman for you." "Dad, that's not fair. Elena is a good woman." "She may be, but a good woman for you must be someone who respects the relationship you have with your father, not someone who tries to replace it or minimize it." I hung up the phone feeling strangely calm. I had said what I needed to say. I had established my boundaries clearly. Now Michael had to decide what was most important to him. 2 weeks passed without news from Michael. 2 weeks during which I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I had lost my son again for being too demanding. But the third Sunday I heard the doorbell at 3 p.m. When I opened the door, I found Michael standing there alone. "Hello, Dad." "Hello, son." "And Elena?" "Elena and I broke up." I let him in without asking questions. I made coffee and we sat in the living room as we had done hundreds of times before. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Michael sighed deeply. I explained to her that I needed to maintain my relationship with you, that Sundays were our time. She said she understood, but then she started making comments about how I was a mama's boy, about how I needed to become independent from you. And what did you tell her? I told her that my father had been there for me my whole life, that he had sacrificed everything to give me a good education and a good future. I explained that respecting you and maintaining a relationship with you wasn't being a daddy's boy, but being a good son. I felt warmth growing in my chest. And what did she respond? She said I had to choose between having a serious relationship with her or continuing to be dependent on my father. Michael looked directly into my eyes. "So I chose." "Don't you regret it?" "No, Dad. I learned my lesson with Jessica. I'm not going to allow anyone else to make me choose between love and loyalty. The right person for me will understand that you're part of my life, and that's non-negotiable." We remained in silence for a moment, enjoying the coffee and the peace we had finally found. "Dad," Michael said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know you had to be so firm with me? How did you know you shouldn't allow anyone else to interfere?" I thought about his question for a moment. "Because during the months we were separated, I learned something very important, son. I learned that it's better to be alone and have dignity than to be accompanied and be disrespected. Aren't you afraid of being alone?" "No, Michael, because now I know the difference between being alone and being abandoned. Being alone is a choice you make to protect your peace. Being abandoned is something others do to you when they don't value what you have to offer." Michael nodded slowly. "I think I learned that difference too." "I hope so, son, because the next woman who enters your life will have to understand that respecting me is part of respecting you." We stayed talking until it got dark. Michael helped me wash the dishes as he had done when he was young, and before leaving he hugged me with the same intensity as when he was a child. "I love you, Dad, and I promise I'll never again allow anyone to make me doubt that. I love you too, son. When he left, I remained in my rocking chair, looking at the photos I had in the living room. Photos of Michael when he was a child. Photos of my wife. Photos of a life built with love and sacrifice. I had lost money. I had lost time. I had lost innocence about what people are capable of doing for money. But I had gained something more valuable. I had gained self-respect, clear boundaries, and a relationship with my son based on mutual respect instead of obligation or guilt. Jessica had thought that destroying my relationship with Michael would give her control over him and access to his money. But in the end, her betrayal had strengthened the bond between my son and me in a way that would never have been possible without that trial by fire. Now, when I wake up every morning, I don't do it as a victim of circumstances. I wake up as a man who survived, who fought, and who won. Not through revenge, but through silent dignity and unbreakable boundaries. And that, I thought while turning off the lights and preparing for sleep, was the best revenge of all. Living well, with self-respect, and with my son's love restored on terms that I had established. The war was over, and I had won.